Thanks to the UW Recycling team for being here, as well as to all of our participants today. I will be sort of monitoring the chat, and then if there are any questions, UW Recycling team can look at those at the end. If you guys miss one, then I will come back and ask the questions from the team. But any participants, if you have any questions, feel free to just put those in the chat. Thanks, everybody, and I'll let the UW Recycling team take it away.
Great, thank you. So my name is Audrey Tabor. I'm interim manager at UW Recycling, and I have Adam with me today. And Adam is a program coordinator at UW Recycling.
Sure am. So I'll go ahead and start us off. So we are UW Recycling, and if you're not familiar with us, we have a few different roles on campus. First and foremost, we are contract administrators. So we work with a whole bunch of outside vendors, waste and recycling, to make sure that our day-to-day operations go smoothly. We also have a crew and a fleet of vehicles that goes around to most of the buildings on campus, and we collect waste and recycling. We are also in charge of infrastructure because we want to make sure that everybody has access to recycling and composting when they need it. So any building on campus and even outside of the buildings, if you see a bin, we're responsible for putting it there. And we work with a whole bunch of different groups to make sure that those bins are in the right places. And last but not least, we do outreach, much like we're doing today. We love talking about garbage. Love it, love it, love it. So as Torrin was saying, if you ever have any questions during the presentation, just put it in the chat. I believe we'll also set aside some time at the end for questions as well. Next slide, please. So there's a few reasons why we do what we do. First is the environment. As you know, the University of Washington is basically a small city. We have a massive amount of students, staff, and faculty. So we also have a pretty large ecological footprint. So anything that we can do to lessen the impact that we have on the area around us is a big win. We also have a financial aspect to what we do. So it's about $160 per ton to send something to the landfill. It's around $60 per ton for us to compost materials. And it's basically free for us to recycle. So we save the university quite a bit amount of money by recycling and composting versus sending all that stuff to the landfill. There's also a cultural aspect to it. So there is an executive order emphasizing recycling and composting. So while everybody wants to do the right thing on campus, it's very important for us to actually show results. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we do what we do. And last but not least, it is law in Seattle. Recyclable materials and compostable materials were banned from the landfill. There's not really any way for them to enforce that, but it is one of the things that motivates us to do what we do, because we want to make sure that we adhere to city law and ordinances as best as we possibly can.
Awesome, thank you, Adam. So because we're here to celebrate America Recycles Day, which is actually today, coincidentally, and also as part of the Sustainable Spaces program with sustainability, we thought we'd spend a little bit of extra time talking about the infrastructure that we have installed throughout campus that many of you are probably very familiar with. So we have our self-service bins. And the green bins, as many of you probably know, are called Minimax bins, and they are unlined, which reflects the fact that most waste generated on campus should be, or most recyclable waste needs to be clean, empty, and dry, and most garbage waste is dry material by nature, so things like plastic bags or candy wrappers, chip wrappers, granola bar wrappers. So that's why those two bins are designed to be unlined. And they also are self-service bins, meaning that if you have one at your desk, it's your duty to take it to a centralized bin and empty it out there. That saves our custodians countless hours of time that they would have spent relining the bins or emptying the bins out, and allows them to focus on more essential cleaning tasks. And we also have, in addition to the green desk side bin and small attached trash bin, we offer plastic film and mixed paper recycling bins that you all can request through our online forms, which we will talk about a little bit later. And then we also have our whole broad assortment of other bins that we set up on campus in classrooms and interior common areas. We always have sets of recycling and garbage bins together. It's our policy to not have a standalone garbage bin. It always has to be paired at least with a recycling bin, and in often cases paired with in a trio with a compost bin as well, because lots of the to-go ware and serviceware on campus, most of it, in fact, is actually compostable. So we really emphasize composting and making sure that everybody has easy access to compost on campus. Even in the restrooms, I'm sure you've all noticed, we have paper towel bins to collect that waste in restrooms, as well as small trash bins to collect any other waste that could contaminate the paper towel stream. And then we have our larger bins in hallways and public areas. And these bins are heavier duty and meant to not be able to be moved easily. So they don't pose a fire hazard. And they all have a 35-pound max bag weight, and that's something that was established with the help of our custodial ergonomics team. And we want to make sure that the bins that we provide always work with our wonderful custodial teams, and that we're not posing any risk to them in their day-to-day work. And all of the public area bins on campus should be front servicing, or at least for the most part. And that just makes it much easier for our custodial team to empty them safely every day. So that's kind of the reasons for why we have the bins laid out the way that we do on campus. And now Adam's going to start us off talking about what goes where.
Great, thanks, Audrey. Yeah, before I get into the nitty gritty of recycling, I just want to go over a waste snapshot because we did a really nifty study back in 2018 where we were able to have actual facts and figures on how we're doing with our current waste diversion rate and where we could improve. So right now we're hovering at around a 61% diversion rate. So when I talk about waste diversion, that means all the material that doesn't belong in the garbage, diverting it to different streams, such as recycling or composting. So right now, we're at about 38% of the material that we produce ends up in the landfill. And 13.8% is composted or is food waste, and 16% is mixed recyclables. However, if we did everything perfectly and everybody sorted everything exactly the way it should be, we could actually achieve an 83% waste diversion rate. So only 16% of the material that we produce should actually end up in the landfill. And for some people, that number seems a little high. Just to let you know, that includes the waste from the medical center. So a lot of the material that they produce is actual garbage. And so that skews our numbers just a little bit north of what a household would produce. But we did figure out that almost 30% of the material that we produce should be composted, while we're only composting 13% of it right now. So that is actually kind of our low-hanging fruit right now, whereas that's where we can make the most impact by focusing our resources on that. And if we recycled everything correctly, or if we sorted our recyclables correctly, 23% of our waste would be mixed recycling. We also have a few other waste streams, like paper recycling that includes cardboard, wooden landscape waste, and most notably surplus and donations. So all the things that are purchased with university funds, whether it's in working condition or not, should go to surplus. If they can resell it, they do. If they don't, they actually send it to some of our other vendors. Like we have white goods recycling vendors, white goods like refrigerators, things like that. And then we also have electronics recycling vendors. So Surplus is able to work with them and recycle that material. But the material that they resell is a really big impact for the university because we don't have to get rid of that material. Not only does it save us on disposal costs, they actually pull in money from some of that material too. So that's a really good program for the university. And if you're ever looking for office furniture or decorations, or they have so many things, it's always worth checking in with them. And we have a slide on them a little bit later on as well too. So if you want to go to the next one. So I'm going to start in on recycling. So everyone, I'm sure, especially if you've been in Seattle for a little while, it's pretty familiar with some of the usual suspects like bottles, cans, well, maybe not so much cartons, but paper, glass bottles, things like that. A lot of people are pretty familiar with those. They know that stuff can go into the single stream recycling. Cartons are a little bit of a different material. So those Minute Maid orange juice cartons or those aseptic packaging, like you would get almond milk in the supermarket, those aren't recyclable in a lot of places in the country, but we're a little bit ahead of the curve here in Seattle. So we actually have a way to recycle those. So those can go into the recycling here. It gets a little even more complicated when we start looking at plastics. So normally if we were in a live group, I would ask everybody to raise their hands if they heard the fact that if an item has a recycle symbol on it, that chasing arrow symbol with a number in the center, that means it's recyclable, and almost everybody raises their hand. The fact of the matter is that that's not true. That number in the middle of the tracing arrow symbol doesn't really tell us anything about sortability or even recyclability. It just tells us what that material is made out of, what type of plastic. So 7 is the number other. And in that category actually falls compostable plastic, which is 100% not recyclable. Even though a lot of times it still has those chasing arrow symbols with the number 7 in it. So I always tell people to ignore that sign and go by the shape of the material. So bottles, cups, jugs, and tubs. Those are the things that we most frequently generate, and those are the things that are the most easiest to recycle. So definitely focus on those things. And for everything else, if you're confused, you can always send us an email. Next slide. It's also very important to, when you have those items, that they need to be clean, empty, and dry. The reason being is when those things are sorted, during the sorting process, all of that stuff is usually mixed together. It doesn't stay contained, and then eventually it's baled. If dirty materials do end up going through, especially paper, those things can just end up being moldy, and they can potentially contaminate an entire bale. Also, those bales of material do have to be sold. People have to buy those and make recyclable materials out of them, make recycled materials out of them. So when we have a really dirty bale, that reduces the price that bale is worth. And sometimes it's not even purchased if it's dirty enough. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons why we want to make sure our recyclables are clean, empty, and dry. But when you are recycling, definitely make sure. And a lot of people ask me, how clean is clean enough? I just say as clean as you can get it. If you have a peanut butter jar and there's enough peanut butter to make a peanut butter sandwich, that's too much peanut butter. We're just looking at the amount of material that can potentially splash out and get onto other recyclables. So at home, I always make sure that I clean my recyclables out with a sponge and water.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam, very much. Beyond the bin, we have some more specialized recycling programs available on campus that you're welcome to participate in. So we'll just do a quick overview of a couple of those. So I mentioned earlier that a lot of garbage is just like plastic wrappers and plastic bags and things like that. And on campus, we try to make it fairly easy for folks to actually recycle certain types of plastic film. So you can't recycle things like candy wrappers or other like crinkly small pieces of plastic. But if you have plastic film that is clean, dry, and can easily be stretched, we recommend doing the thumb test. So you have your like plastic grocery bag and you can put your thumb and kind of stretch the plastic without tearing it or ripping it. Then that means it passes the stretch test and it can go into a plastic film toter on campus. And the sustainability map actually shows where all of the plastic film toters are located on campus. And you're also welcome to reach out to us if you're not sure where the closest toter is or if you need a link to that sustainability map. We also collect plastic film from loading docks on campus. So as long as your plastic film, like I said, clean, dry, easily stretched, and is free of tape and labels, you can bag it up and put it on the loading dock and we will come and collect it from you. You just have to give us a heads up. We also offer recycling for styrofoam. Follows a very similar process as recycling plastic film. On our website, we actually offer giant clear bags that we can send you through campus mail to collect your styrofoam in, because often it's either styrofoam peanuts that get all over the place and need to be bagged up, or it's just kind of awkward large pieces of styrofoam, and it's just easier to use our very large plastic bags to contain all that material. And so, but you don't have to use our bags. If you just have a smaller amount of styrofoam, you can use any clear bag that you have. And again, the material must be free of all tape and labels. And you can just tie it up, put it on your loading dock, give us a heads up, and we can come and collect it from you. We also offer recycling for a whole bunch of other items, and I recommend checking out our website for the full list. We'll provide that information a little bit later on, but we provide containers for printer and copier cartridge recycling. If you have just a few small toner cartridges, you're welcome to put them in any e-media bin. And e-media, there's also a map of all e-media bins on the sustainability map as well. Or again, you can reach out to us if you have any questions about where the closest one is. You also, in e-media bins, you're also welcome to dispose small amounts of batteries, small electronics, and CDs and other media like that. We also offer recycling for fluorescent lamps and light bulbs. If you have fluorescent lamps that are out in your office space or your lab space, you should fill out an FS Works request form to have those bulbs removed. We recommend that staff don't remove fluorescent tubes or fluorescent lights on their own. And then once they are removed and replaced, facilities will manage the recycling of those removed tubes. If you do have tubes like for a large capital project, or you just found some that had already been removed in your office, we have a form to fill out on our website to arrange collection service for that material as well. And then lastly, we also offer recycling for softbound and hardbound books. Small amounts of softbound books or like magazines can just be discarded in your normal recycling bin. But if you have large amounts, you're welcome to contact us and we can work out the best way to recycle that material. And hardbound books, because of the materials in the bindings and the covers, have to be recycled through a specific vendor. So we offer recycling options for those materials separately. Adam, would you like to add anything on these, or we can just talk about our website later on?
No, I'll make sure that we talk about our forms and such later on. So that was pretty good. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
Okay, moving on to compost. So especially if you live in Seattle, a lot of people have been very lucky to have composting service available curbside. And so a lot of people are familiar with this, but some people aren't. I actually moved from Pennsylvania, and when I first came here, I was like, wait, what? This is very different. So the usual suspects for compost, of course, are food scraps. A lot of those materials can be put in backyard composting piles or bins. So people are pretty familiar with that. But included in those food scraps are meat, bones, and dairy. And those are materials that you normally wouldn't be able to compost in your backyard, but we can here at the University of Washington and Seattle as a whole, because we have special composting vendors that use specific processes that can actually break down those materials. So we can compost meat, bones, and dairy here. Aside from food scraps, we have a whole bunch of different compostable materials available to us since we have those municipal composting vendors. So if you're on campus, most of the materials or serviceware on campus are actually compostable. There is an asterisk next to that statement just because right now we're going through a whole bunch of supply chain issues. So whereas normally all of those materials would be compostable, right now some of those might not be. So it is very important to read the packaging, read the labels on there. You're going to want to look for things like BPI certified or 100% compostable. If you see something like biodegradable, that doesn't mean compostable. So make sure that you read everything carefully. If you're not sure if something is compostable or not, it is really good for you to put that material into the garbage. If you're just not sure and you don't have time to reach out to us or look on the Seattle website, it's best to not contaminate our compost stream. So it's fine to lose a few items to the landfill bin that way. But it's also important to compost food soiled paper, and that includes things like pizza boxes. A lot of people like to try to recycle pizza boxes, but once those materials get too greasy or have food waste on them at all, those can no longer be recycled. So you would have to always compost things like that. And last, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you're doing great. Todd has a very relevant question of what should we do with large compostable items such as pizza boxes, which won't fit into our hallway compost bin. That'd be a good
Gotcha.
time to address that now.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yes, I just finished talking about them. So if you can fold them down, that's always great. But if they're just too big, they won't fold down. I would take them directly to the building's loading dock where we have dumpsters or toters that are much larger than the bins in the hallway. You can in certain places put the pizza boxes right next to the bin.
Yeah, we had just started a pilot program in the health sciences building T-Wing before the pandemic, actually, asking with little signs, asking people to put their pizza boxes next to the public area bins. My understanding is that the custodial teams on campus prefer that the large items like pizza boxes be placed next to the bins instead of shoved inside, just to make it easier for their teams and avoid ripping the bags, stuff like that.
Yeah, there we go. Good point.
But yeah, definitely if you're able to bring the waste directly to the compost containers at your loading dock, that's advisable.
Definitely. Oh, we got another one. Are hamburger wrappers and boxes from fast food places compostable? That's also a really good question. In some cases, those paper wrapped items and paper to go containers sometimes can actually have a plastic lining to make sure that those stay rigid when they have food inside. So if you see something that's like overly shiny, doesn't rip very easily, that's a very good indication that there's plastic in there, and that can't be composted. But again, I would never try to put something in the compost bin that doesn't specifically say compostable on it, because sometimes those liners aren't very apparent. So always look for those indications on there. And last but not least on the slide, I just want to go over the types of compostable bags, because a lot of people try to put their compostable items in plastic bags and then put those in the curbside bin. Plastic bags are one of the biggest sources of contamination for compost. So the two bags that you can use to compost your items are paper bags and those special compostable bags that you would find at supermarkets. They're generally green, have a very different feel to them. But those are the different things that you would try to use. Great. So one of the reasons why it's very important to compost versus sending that material to the landfill is because when we compost these materials, it only takes about 3 to 6 months for that for those items to actually become soil amendment that we know is compost that we can actually use to grow more food from. If that material were sent to the landfill, it just kind of stays there. There's a very good picture on the left that I always ask people, what do you think that stuff is? And somebody always comes out with the answer. Those are actually carrots. And those were dug out of the landfill after 10 years. And even though they're kind of nasty and black on the outside, they're still very orange on the inside, and you can still tell that those are carrots. So landfills are designed to hold materials and not break down. And so when we send stuff to the landfill, it doesn't go anywhere. Nobody sorts through that material to put that stuff in the right location. It just stays there. So we would much prefer that material be composted so that it can be reused.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And so to wrap up the 3 main bins, we have landfill, which is whatever is left over. And in reality, there really shouldn't be too much. As I mentioned earlier, main components of landfill waste on campus are chips and candy wrappers, things that are too small to be recycled, bottle caps, lids under 3 inches, and dirty recyclables. So for instance, the tin or the aluminum container in the center of the slide that's covered in red sauce, if it was perfectly clean, it could be recycled, but because it's pretty impossible to get all that food waste off of it, it should just go into the landfill. And then same pet waste. Oftentimes we see those compostable pet waste bags, but pet waste poses a potential hazard to the folks that work at the compost facilities. So even if it's in a compostable bag, it needs to go into the landfill. And we also have things like lab glass, as well as broken dishes and broken like drinking glasses, things like that. That type of glass, broken or not, actually needs to go into the landfill if you're trying to dispose of it, because it cannot be recycled like a single-use glass bottle could be. And then also gloves, masks, PPE, all of that needs to go into the landfill and is not recyclable at this time. So just to emphasize another point of why we like to avoid sending things to the landfill is that while recycling is a relatively local process, our recycling vendor has a material sorting facility in the city of Seattle that they sort all of the recycling into bales and then send it off to be made into new items. And then our compost hauler hauls all of our compostable waste to their facility in Everett, where it becomes that wonderful soil amendment that Adam was talking about. But our garbage, along with all of the garbage from the city of Seattle, is put on a train and hauled over 300 miles to the small town of Arlington, Oregon. I imagine it's a small town. I have not been there actually, so I should not say that. And so this train runs 6 days per week. It's a mile long and double stacked and carries an estimated 18 million pounds of waste each trip. So it's just pretty staggeringly large amount of waste that is sent from the city of Seattle every single day, 6 days a week. So anything that we can do to reduce the amount of waste that is sent every day and save on transportation costs, saves on the emissions of this train running through communities the entire trip down. Anything we can do to avoid sending things to the landfill is a good thing. Let's see, and Adam is going to talk a little bit more about some of the resources that we've mentioned and as well as some new ones.
Absolutely. So we have a whole bunch of resources available, and I was already talking UW Surplus's praises earlier. But like I was saying, anything purchased with university funds, whether it's in working condition or not, has to be sent to UW Surplus. So if they can't resell it, they can work with our recycling vendors to make sure that it goes to the right place. And it's much better to reuse these materials than it is to dispose of them. As UW Recycling, we always talk the praises of recycling, but recycling is the last R. There are two others that are far more important than recycling, and that's reducing and reusing. So by going to UW Surplus, you can reduce the amount of new items that you purchase and reuse the items that we do purchase on campus, or reuse the items that we do have already on campus. So it's a great sustainable initiative, and they just have some really cool stuff. I purchased, actually, they're too far away, I can't get them, but these really awesome ornate glass pumpkins recently for Halloween, and they just have like really awesome things all the time. So sign up for their newsletter and they'll send you updates on that. But through their program, we actually diverted over 2 million, well, close to 3 million pounds of material from the landfill in 2017. So it is a massive operation that they have over there. And we are very lucky to work pretty closely with them.
I would imagine similar stats for the years after 2017. We just need to update this slide.
Yes, correct. All right. So if you go to uwrecycling.com, that actually takes you to our homepage on the facilities website. Here, it kind of lists all of the services that we provide. So we were talking earlier about bins. If you need a desk side bin, whether that be a Minimax bin, plastic film recycling, or paper recycling, you can get those through our website. If you have an office clean out and you need paper toters, you can get those through our website. You can request styrofoam recycling bags, spent lighting, so those FLT tubes, for fluorescent tubes, you can get those picked up by our website. Or if you're having a special event, also, we provide special event containers for you. So we make sure that you have access to recycling and composting for these special events. So anything that we do, is listed on our website, but probably our most important resource is our disposal guide. So that the information that you'll find on our disposal guide is campus specific, because the city of Seattle has its own guides, but they're not necessarily what we would do here on campus. So if you have a question about any of these materials, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. But the disposal guide is just a really quick reference for you, and you can search by material. So it's a great reference for everybody looking to recycle, compost correctly. Also, we cover a lot of material through these trash talks, but if you want a more in-depth look at kind of how we handle waste on campus, as well as bigger look at reducing your footprint and reusing the materials that you currently have, I would check out our course on Bridge. So it's the Intro to Recycling and Waste Diversion at UW Seattle. It takes you only about 30 minutes to complete, but it is a wonderful resource for you as well. So it covers a lot of the material that we talked about today, as well as a bunch of other things.
Yeah, and as part of America Recycles Day, which is today, for the entire month of November, if you take this course, and you have to have a UW-Net ID to take the course. And then if you email us with your UW-Net ID, we can check that you took it, and we will send you a low waste prize if you're interested, just for the month of November. Awesome. Thank you, Adam, for sharing those resources. And that's all of the content that we have for you today. I know we have some questions to address in the chat, and you're welcome to drop some more questions in the chat if anybody has anything on their minds. But after the presentation, we are still here to help. We love to answer your questions and help you get set up with the waste infrastructure that you need. The best way to reach us is, excuse me, by emailing recycle@uw.edu. But we also have our phone number, and you are welcome to check out our website anytime. And so let's go ahead and dive into some questions from the chat.
We
Adam,
got
do you
a
want to talk about that first one.
Sure, yeah, I was just gonna say we got a great question from Jack regarding some weird plastic items that don't fit into that bottles, cups, jugs, and tubs category, which is a great question because there are a bunch of really weird plastic items out there. Probably the number one being blister packaging. So if you've ever bought like say batteries at the store, you know how it has the paper back and the plastic kind of bubble on the front where all the batteries are? That's a really good instance of blister packaging. And basically blister packaging is just vacuum form plastic that they can make into any shape. And that's why it's comes in so many different shapes, and it's a really weird thing. But it's not very good grade plastic. And also there's no really good way for us to sort it out at the sorting facility. So all of that stuff would actually just go into the landfill. If you do have like another instance of a weird plastic item that also isn't blister packaging, you can always email us because one question further down actually from Torin is, what would you do with plastic pots from potted plants? That's also a weird plastic item that doesn't necessarily fit into the bottles, cups, jugs, and tubs category. Those currently are recyclable in Seattle as long as they're clean, empty, and dry. Most of the time, those things are filled with dirt though. I actually reuse mine because I actually have a lot of plants. So if you can reuse those, they're more than fine to just clean them out. But yeah, in general, if you have those weird items, send us an email.
Awesome. Let's see. Next question going down the list. We talked about the large compostable items. And then we also addressed Nancy's question of, are glossy magazines recyclable? The answer is yes. Things like if you go to Bartels or Costco and you have photos printed out, photos are not actually recyclable because of the chemicals in the paper. They just contain a lot of plastic. And same with receipts. Those are two kind of tricky, shiny paper items that are not recyclable, but magazines are.
One thing I can talk about is paper and like the difference between recycling it and composting it. And that kind of goes in with that hamburger wrapper question also. So paper in general can be recycled up to 7 times before it can no longer be recycled anymore. So it goes from like cardboard to paperboard to office paper, and eventually becomes things like paper towels or napkins. Once it gets to that point, it can no longer be recycled anymore. That stuff would have to be composted. So that includes like the tissue paper that you would get with hamburger wrappers. As long as that's all just paper, you wouldn't want to recycle that. That would be composted. And with napkins or paper towels that you use to just wipe your hands off if you had like barbecue, that stuff can be composted as well.
Great, thank you. It looks like I think you addressed Torrin's question about plastic pots from potted plants.
Mhm.
Then we have a question from Kelly about, and I think we have some answers also going to this question. Our
Yeah.
lab does a lot of 3D printing, mostly PLA. Do we have resources for recycling PLA? And let's see. Liz mentioned that there's a campus sustainability fund project that was planning to collect used plastic scrap from 3D printers. Not sure if the status now.
Precious plastics.
Maybe that might have been them. Okay, so yeah, so PLA plastic, that's a tough one. Adam, do you want to address that one? I think we just got an email about that pretty recently.
Yeah, we did. And that, yeah, that is a tough one that I really wish I had a great answer to. Unfortunately, I don't. The main answer, the main response to that is our compost vendor, Cedar Grove, will not take 3D printing like leftover stuff, even though it is PLA. It's made from corn, it is compostable. The reason being is that they focus on things like food scraps and anything that has to do with food. So like serviceware and those to-go containers. That's what they're focusing on. And when they do tests for compostability, that's what they generally test. That 3D PLA, there's no real way to know if that stuff is compostable when it gets to them because it just looks like plastic scraps. So that's not something that they could easily identify. That's not something that they really ever tested for compostability. So that's not something that they can accept at the time at this point in time. So that stuff would end up going into the garbage.
And another thing too is that the reason that, so Cedar Grove is our compost vendor, and they do accept like PLA cups and serviceware and containers, all of that good stuff. But they really accept it because it often comes with really nutritious, or nutritious for the soil at least, nutritious for the compost, food scraps. And so if we were just giving them perfectly clean PLA plastic material, that actually doesn't contribute very well to the quality of their compost. What they want is all the food scraps that come with the PLA serviceware and packaging. So it's not their favorite material. And so if we were just giving them PLA scraps from 3D printers, there's no food scraps involved with that, no great nutrients for the compost. So they just, yeah, they don't like that material very much on its own.
Mm-hmm. And for those that don't know what we're talking about, PLA stands for polylactic acid. It's basically plastic that's made from corn and is specifically designed to break down in the composting facilities. So yeah.
Yeah, all the pictures of the compostable cups that we showed earlier are PLA.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see. And then Damon, thank you for dropping some links in the chat. Nancy had asked about sustainability map location with the various disposal bins, and Damon sent that link over. Let's see. Okay, so then I think Jack had a follow-up question about numbers and plastic. Is that a no about using the numbers? I'm looking for a general answer for stuff I encounter in the future. I would say that should not be looking at the numbers to determine recyclability.
Here in Seattle, at least. There are some places when you get outside of Seattle that say they only take things like 2 and 5. But yeah, here in Seattle, I would still say, yeah, ignore those numbers.
Agreed. And then a question from Catherine. So compostable plastic items are not actually compostable. How does UW actually process them, or do we expect to in the future? So that might have been a little bit of confusion that we caused, but compostable plastics are compostable. They're just not as good of a, Cedar Grove doesn't like them quite as much as sending them like food scraps or yard waste or things of that nature. But they do break down, they are compostable. We just can't compost them on campus. They have to be sent to an industrial compost facility like Cedar Grove has. Anything to add on that, Adam?
No, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. And then Liz shared link to compostable approved plastics and packaging. Yep, all of the items on the link that Liz shared have been tested and proven that they break down in the type of facility that Cedar Grove operates. So yeah, we have a couple more minutes if anybody has any questions, any other questions to drop in there, but I really appreciate these questions that you've all been sending. They're very good in-depth questions.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I love when they make me think also. It's like, oh man, what is the answer to that one again?
That is good. Good practice.
Thank you, Audrey and Adam, for the great presentation. That was very, very interesting. And it looks like there was one more question. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was about packaging peanuts.
Yeah,
Oh.
so packing peanuts, just really quickly, they can go into a bag and we will pick them up just like normal packing peanuts. They even can be mixed in with normal packing peanuts because the vendor that we send them to doesn't actually like melt them down or recycle them. They actually just give them back out to the community for free. So yeah, compostable packing peanuts, handled like normal peanuts, bag them up, put them on your loading dock and let us know and we will come and collect them.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Fabulous information as always. For everyone who is still in the presentation, I just wanted to add a little bit of information about our Green Office and Green Lab program. We have been updating it. So we have a much shorter questionnaire. It's about 20 questions long. And then we also wanted to provide opportunities for people to really learn and be able to engage with sustainability on campus, which is why we had this presentation with UW Recycling. So they were our first kickoff presentation and they did a fabulous job. Our next presentation will be in winter quarter, probably end of January, beginning of February. So keep an eye out for that. And we're always happy to take suggestions. So, you know, if any of you have thoughts or ideas on how we can make our green certification program better, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. You can just email me directly. So Damon, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I'm Damon Eklund. I'm do communications with UW Sustainability. So I work with Torin, and I was just going to say the idea behind the Green Office program, and especially our kind of new take on it, is that we are trying to make it really a resource for you, so that you know, an office that signs up for the Green Office program should have at least one contact that we can email. We'll email resources, tips, educational information that you can share with your office and however works for you, whether it's a staff newsletter or just maybe taking a minute in a staff meeting. We just want to give you the information that you can use to share with people around your office so that everyone can really understand the best way to be sustainable. And also want to make sure that that we're providing that information for you in ways that make sense for people. So as Torin said, we want to make sure that if you're interested in joining, let us know what works, what doesn't throughout the year. Each quarter, we're going to have a presentation like this to kind of do a deeper dive into a topic, so that you take that information, feel informed, and can take that again to share with your colleagues, other people in your office, other people across the university. And so we're going to use the Green Office program to really give people the tools that they need to be sustainable in their workplace. And again, really want to thank Audrey and Adam for joining us for this kind of kickoff for this new program.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and thanks to Anna at the Whole U for her support in getting the word out about this presentation.
Yeah,
Thank-
thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.